what excites me about teaching? The thought that I'm making a positive impact and a positive change in the world. And when I left my work and decided to come back to school, the one thing I wanted to do was to change the way people perceived other people around the world, so that when they saw another culture, they weren't frightened of it, they didn't bring the ethnocentric assumptions to the table, they were respectful of diversity and embraced diversity for what the benefits it can bring to the table. Yeah, I am smiling because, you know, I love teaching here. This is the best job I've ever had in the world. I really love it. And I'm not saying that because you know, I just love it. I love teaching here, and I feel like I'm doing what I should be doing. I think the question is more, why do I engage students in my class? When I was a student, I sat in a lot of classes where the teacher talked and I listened and I took notes, and I sat there and I was very frustrated because I wanted to answer, I wanted to discuss it, I wanted to see what my peers were saying, I wanted to just kind of synthesize it into what I was thinking. So the teaching practices that I use address that concern that I had when I was a student. About 10 years ago, I started to use clickers in my classroom. Clickers are a form of polling technology where the students can respond at that time just numerically or alphabetically to a question that someone might have. And I realised that that gave them a voice in the classroom. And from that 10 years ago, they've developed now that students can can text up to the podium. They can send whole sentences or whole questions, or as a group they can collaborate and send their questions up to the podium. But second to that, I think the next one I jumped on board with was a think, pair, share. Think, pair, share is very, very common technology, or lack of technology. It's a very low-tech thing that people can implement in their classrooms that basically enables the students to think about what you've just said, share it with their partner, and get a co-conspirator in the classroom. And then after they've got that collaboration going between 2 or 4 students, then can share it with the rest of the classroom. More recently, I've started to use role-playing in the classroom, and that has been an amazing thing. It can be done with 25 students or 100 students, it doesn't really matter, and it illustrates the assumptions that we bring to the table and how we need to adopt various perspectives and gather facts and adopt critical thinking and not jump to assumptions about the other, and solve problems collaboratively, looking at a problem holistically. So I run the gamut from introducing discussion in the classroom, to polling technology in the classroom, to role-playing in the classroom, to problem solving in the classroom, to critical thinking, to discussions, to all of it. I do a lot of it now. I always wanted to be the professor that the students turned up to the class because they wanted to be there, not because they had to be there. I think one of the things that surprises people when they learn about my pedagogy or my teaching philosophy is that I don't give exams in the classroom. And by not giving exams in the classroom, it takes away that whole frustration and nervousness that a student might have about learning what you're expecting them to learn. And suddenly they can step back from that nervousness and start to enjoy the learning process. So I will get students to do readings or research before they come to class. They'll be asked a set of critical questions that they have to answer before class. And when they come to class, they hand that work in for a grade, but they also use that work to formulate discussions in the classroom. So they come playing a vital role in the education process because we're learning from one another. I really enjoy the fact that every day I go to class, I'm learning new facts about stuff that interests me because they're bringing it in. So I formulated this action plan whereby over the course of a semester, I set to say that at least 10 minutes of the class, 10 minutes of an hour and 15-minute class was going to be devoted to some form of activity, be it discussion, be it silent reflection on the student's part, a 1-minute paper, be it a think, pair, share, be it some little tiny activity that only took 10 minutes from the classroom, with the goal ultimately at the end of the semester to have maybe 20 minutes of lecture and the rest of the class devoted to activity that was not busy work. And it's really important that it doesn't become busy work. That it's not busy work, that it bolsters the education process and the understanding and the synthesis and the evaluation of the material. We wanted to engage our students, we had to engage them in the class, and engagement in the class has a direct correlation to the quality of the work that they put out. What practical steps would I give a faculty member if they were thinking about implementing this? Start small. Yes, I do initially feel that when you first implement active learning, you do have to decide on the 2 or 3 key points that you want your lesson to convey and drill them home. However, when you get the students engaged in the learning, what happens is that key point requires knowledge of something else, which requires knowledge of something else, which requires knowledge of something else. And what happens is they become so engaged in it, they start to go down the rabbit hole themselves. And before you know it, they've gone beyond where the textbook went, and they're starting to think more deeply than any textbook could possibly provide. So therefore, you as the professor and facilitator of this discussion need to be even more prepared than you would be if you just had your lecture notes and you started reading your lecture notes. They're going to take you off script, and you need to be prepared for that. And because this is a learning community that you've established, it's okay for you to say, you know, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to it. Does anyone else? I think that if you just give the students the latitude, they'll really surprise you. They really will surprise you. I was surprised, and they surprise me every day.